Hello people, another video. This is just carrying on my theme of doing a few videos on the Ten Commandments. They are a crucial piece of legislative resource because, you know, the Judeo-Christian culture that most of the Western countries live in, especially the Commonwealth, they are based on the Old and the New Testament, and the Old Testament is kind of like the bedrock of the Ten Commandments and certain other things in, was it Deuteronomy and Leviticus. And there's other places to find mentions of behavioural law, if you like. But I like to present to you now a Vanity Fair video, which is very well done actually. It's Christopher Hitchens, who's the late great intellect. And the good thing about listening to someone like Christopher Hitchens, who's an atheist, I think he's Jewish, but an atheist now, as so many Jews claim to be. They fall out with the ideologue of the fundamental Jewish requirements of their faith, probably similar, no different to Catholics or Protestants or any other religion. You know, at some point someone's going to have a falling out with the requirements of the religion. But Christopher Hitchens is an intellect of some merit, and that's worth noting, that he has the finest of educations, the finest of minds, most importantly, a very simplified view of the world in some respects, but he gets to that simplified view of the world by very convoluted and complex means. He does his reading, he does his research, he meets the people, he goes to the places, and experiences it firsthand. And lo and behold, he draws what he would believe as truthful opinions on the matter. Now, whether they're true or not, that's an entirely different matter. But I do take him as a very wise individual and someone who's very well read and well learned. And you can't aspire for much more in life than being one of those kind of chaps. So yeah, you know, all my own faults and lacking of education, or our own lacking of education, inertias, then looking at someone like Christopher Hitchens and seeing his opinion on the Ten Commandments is very interesting. And obviously I've introduced him as an atheist, so he has a certain amount of ridicule for religions in general, no particular one. But it's interesting that he goes over the cornerstone of the Bible, or especially the Old Testament and the Ten Commandments, and just has his opinions on how they were written, why they were written, and what his interpretation of them are.
Implausible though it may seem, I want to talk about the Ten Commandments. Who am I, you may well ask, to instruct or advise you on these grave matters? But even Moses himself was a revisionist and issued at least 4 versions of the Decalogue, or the top 10. So if he can be a revisionist, well, so can I. Picture then, if you will, that I'm not just taking a blue pencil, but an actual chisel, and seeing if these tablets of stone could possibly stand a bit of an update for our time. Numbers 1 and 2 actually don't have anything to do with ethics at all. They are injunctions. They remind or instruct you that I am the Lord thy God, that thou shalt have no other gods before me, and they forbid the making of graven images.
I'll just pause it there. So if you recall from my Ten Commandments video, I divided the Ten Commandments into two halves. It was like the first 5 and the latter 5. And you know, when you put them in 2 halves like that, you kind of see that what I was describing as the left-hand side. If you look at my video, the first 5 commandments on the left-hand side of the screen, but very much almost like they weren't really like how to treat your fellow man, how to live lawfully within your society, among your people. It was more like these are like overarching kind of concepts in order to protect yourself from a greater evil. I think I put it in the terms of almost like protecting yourself from the evil one, to quote Phil Robertson. But it's an interesting concept that the first 5 in that vein. Let's look at them in terms of that, and then the latter 5. Let's see how he responds to those. So this is like love the Lord your God, as in, you know, have no other gods before me. So again, this is harking back to the Roman, the Greek pantheons, if you like, and that versus, you know, having one God, which is what was given over to us from the Jewish transcripts and what later became Jesus Christ's sacrifice.
The commandment against the making of graven images, or images of God, is very upsetting to many Catholics, who often leave this bit of the commandment out, because where would Christian art and devotional painting be if you couldn't make impressive images of God, his son, his son's mother? Then we are...
Yeah, because faith does not require idols or sculptures or paintings to reinforce the message. I suppose that's where that comes from. You either have the faith or you don't have the faith. You either believe or you don't believe. And that's in anything in life. You either believe Barack Obama was a great president of all time, or you believe President Trump is the best president of all time, or you believe your team's going to win the sports cup, whatever it is. These are all your own personal beliefs. So having little idols or little paintings to try and reinforce or to convince someone of a belief might harbour false belief or disbelief. So that's an interesting one. But yeah, when I read that, because I didn't know what graven, I think, was it craven images or graven images. I wasn't quite sure what that word was, because obviously it's not something we use in modern times. So obviously when you look it up, it's just literally carved or sculptured images. And I was like, holy crap! Think of all the carved and sculptured images, which is what Christopher Hitchens just alluded to. It's like, yeah, I mean, they're everywhere. It's like, hang on a minute.
Rather sternly ordered not to take the name of this God in vain, and it's then added rather superfluously that you won't be held guiltless if you do take the name of this Lord.
It's almost like don't question the faith, don't question the God.
In vain. Well, no one has ever worked out exactly how to obey this commandment. Is it taking the Lord's name in vain to shout, God is great, while blowing yourself up and killing innocent people? Some say it's obedience to the law of God. When I say God knows, I really mean I think that nobody knows. It's usually wise when promulgating eternal laws to be clear about what you mean. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. The Christians who want this inscribed in courtrooms and in schoolrooms would end up taking Saturday off rather than Sunday.
Hence, Sabbath day, Saturday, is derived from Sabbath, apparently. That's what I've had on reasonable information. Because
this program of commandments is actually a program for the establishment of a fundamentalist Jewish state.
So you have a lot of calendars, if you notice. A lot of people say, and a lot of calendars have the week starting on a Sunday, which is an interesting thing, because I came across that when I was growing up. I was like, oh, why some calendars on a Sunday start and some calendars it's on a Monday that start? And obviously it's whether or not you believe the Sabbath day. So again, a belief. If you believe the Sabbath day starts or ends the week on a Saturday, or you believe that the Sabbath day ends the week on a Sunday, or perhaps even on a Friday, or if you're a Scientologist, on a Wednesday, who knows?
Commandment number 5 enjoins that thou shalt honour thy father and thy mother, which seems reasonable enough. It's an interesting commandment because when given in full, it says that if you do so, you will have a longer tenure of the land that's been promised to you. It's one of the few commandments that comes with an inducement, if you will. It even seems to suggest that you should honour your father and mother because you expect a legacy from them. Number 6, thou shalt not kill. Almost immediately after the events at Sinai and the delivery of these instructions by God from the top of the mountain, Moses orders all his supporters to draw their swords and kill all their friends and brothers for their profanity. Number 7.
Yeah, so now we're getting into the latter 6, or the latter 5 commandments, and there we are. So now we're getting into the human-on-human contact, if you like, and how you should conduct yourself within your communities. And obviously, hypocrite, you could also call hypocrite here with what was essentially being highlighted by Christopher Hitchens, is that, okay, Moses has got all these lovely commandments now set in stone. First tablet constitutes not questioning the faith and keeping yourself away from sin, evil, and let's say some sort of protection of your soul, or damnation of your soul, of your moral being. And then immediately on the last 5, he's got thou shalt not kill, and then he goes and orders to go and kill all those bad people who probably won't follow these codes.
Thou shalt not commit adultery. The Turkish government, an Islamic party, recently tried to make this actual law in Turkey itself, but failed. It's difficult to see why this well-known offence should be classified with murder and theft and perjury.
Well, I'll stop Christopher Hitchens on that. Actually, there's one more. Yeah, adultery. Why does adultery link? Because adultery is almost like a catalyst for the other three. Adultery, like sleeping behind your husband's or wife's back, could lead to the others. It's like almost like the tip of the slide. It may not go down the slide, but it's quite often. And I'm sure in historical terms, you find out your wife's been sleeping with another man. How many? I mean, even that's romanticized in Hollywood movies and all over the place. It's like, you found out some guys cheating on your wife behind your back, or your wife's cheating behind your back, or whichever way you want to do it. Then it never ever leads to a positive outcome in terms of like your emotional commitment to that individual. So it's a breach of trust, which hopefully you're aware of trust law by now. But untrustworthy behaviour, such as lying, perjury, is an untrustful, untruthful nature towards a court of law, and an adultery is untrustworthy behaviour towards your other half. So that's why adultery is such a pivotal point here, which is probably something why Christopher Hitchens hasn't picked up in such a great manner. But then you've got the property element of anyone who, when two become one, and theft, you have the property division element. Now look at all the nonsense family courts that exist out there to deal with citizenry and their inability to settle their affairs themselves, and get dragged into family courts at great expense to both parties. And then obviously they're arbitrarily decided whose property goes where and who gets what. Causality is because of that, such as fathers for justice, and the expectation that women get all the children, and fathers don't necessarily get it, and essentially the money, the man has to pay the money to the woman in order to keep her in her stead, which is all fine. I don't have a view on that, but obviously you're asking for the state essentially to manage your affairs appropriately, because you and your ex-partner, or your divorced or soon to be divorced wife or husband, there's no amicable situation that you can turn to, even within your own family. And then obviously it would be, in this case, your churches and your neighbours and your friends, who can't intermediate on your behalf to say, look, this is a proposal, is this acceptable? But it seems to be, hey, let's go to a lawyer, let's go to a stranger, let's go to the Romans, let's ask the Romans in their court, say what we're going to happen, how we're going to sort out our private problem. We need to do it in the publics for all to see, at the cost of lawyers and shysters. Oops. But that's essentially where theft, murder, and obviously murder is. Every man who's got an ounce of pride would consider at least, what the fuck is this? What's this woman been doing to me behind my back? Because now you're looking at your name, your pride, your honour has been misused, and therefore you're now in some respects a laughingstock. And how a man deals with that individually is very much down to the individual.
The punishment for those who commit it is what you might call self-inflicted. Commandment.
Well, just to highlight what he's saying there, those that commit adultery and cheating on their husbands and breaking up marriages and families, more importantly, is that's kind of like their own reward. Is essentially that their own being, their own existence, for being untrustworthy, deceitful, lying, false. All of these things that are associated with ending a community contract, not only a community contract, but a contract between a man and a woman, and also a social contract in some respects. And then you also have a religious contract element to it. Trespassing on all of those elements and being untrustworthy to all of those elements is kind of like your own reward. You kind of prove that you're not really someone of a high moral standing.
Number 8, thou shalt not steal. Very little to quarrel with here. We don't know of any society that has a commandment saying it's okay to steal, or a social custom that allows it. Then we arrive at a moment of comparatively rare nuance and sophistication. Thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbour. The idea of convicting someone who is innocent by bearing false testimony against them is and should be shocking to the entire human conscience. So this is not only one of the finest of the commandments, maybe the finest, but in its stress on the not and the false witness against, it shows a very rare and careful sense of the balance and scruple that's required for judgment. justice.
So this is basically, condemning innocent people, and Hitchens is actually saying, yeah, this is actually something I fondly agree with. This is morally just. But if you look at the modern system of law that we have compared to how juries used to work, with 12 people who'd use their conscience, and on their consciences they would judge the merits of the case, whether it be a criminal or a civil matter. But nowadays, with the administration of justice speeding it up and profiteering out of it, which is very much going on all over the Commonwealth, apart from a few states in America that still have simplified versions of common law. Whether or not you can access that, that's another question. But what Hitchens is saying here is, justice, judging and condemning innocent people and testifying falsely, again back to the perjury and the trust that you have when you're brought into a courtroom to give truthful evidence. That's all perjury is. It's a breach of your trust that you've given your word, and now you're breaching your word. You're breaking your own word, your bond. You're no different from an adulterer, a liar, a perjurer. It's all the same thing. You're just not keeping your word. And so why is it now? If you look at my criminal justice video about how something in the high 90s of all guilty convictions in America and in England, they've gotten onto the Kool-Aid of this system of justice where you're almost threatened to. It's an inquisition in some respects. You're threatened within an inch of your liberty, your freedoms. In order to testify, to sign the confession against yourself, in order to have a leaner sentence, as it's advertised in all the criminal courtrooms around England. You get 33% off your sentence if you plead guilty at the first instance. That's obviously to save court time, court costs, public money, public costs. And then if you do it at the second instance, you get something like 15 or 20% off. And then if you wait for trial day, you forfeit your discount. Now, if there's never more of an example of the profiteering side of the court system, especially the criminal justice system as it stands in the UK, is that, hey, if you buy now, you get this discount. It's almost like pre-ordering a video game. There we are. Let's put it in modern context. If you pre-order your video game without any idea of how that game is going to end up, you get this introductory price. Or if you pre-order your iPhone, or your pre-order a book, you get a discount. But the book might be written by a 5-year-old, or it might not be completely edited or controlled, quality checked properly. So that's essentially what's happening in the courtrooms. Is that if you plead guilty and save and not worry about the content of the trial, whether it's a good, a strong, weak, or frivolous matter that we can bring against you. If you just plead guilty now, hey presto, you get 33% off your whipping. Instead of 10 whips, you get 7. It's like, I can take 7 whips just to get the monkey off my back. So essentially, this commandment here, that thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbour, in the modern context is thou art bearing false witness against yourself. And that's obviously something that isn't technically, it wasn't a commandment not to do, but people should, you should really know better. Especially if you haven't done the crime. This is the thing, all these convictions and these guilty plea bargainings, these plea deals. If you haven't done it, why do people plead guilty? And that was something that was in the criminal justice film. Is that a guy, for some reason, decided to accept the punishment, even though he knew he was innocent. The woman wasn't even sure that he did it. But at the end, it's just left on some sort of weird cliffhanger that, did he do it? Did he not do it? Well, either way, he's taken the plea and he's doing the time in prison.
The last of, at least this version of the Ten Commandments, is also sometimes famous by its number 10. It forbids the coveting of your neighbour's or thy neighbour's goods, these to include his ox, his ass, his wife. I think there may be 3 thinkable objections here. First, and most obvious, it considers the female of the human species to be equivalent to the chattel. Second, by way of objection, it's the only commandment that punishes thought. Here you're not forbidden to do anything. You're forbidden to think even about something. And third, the attempt to suppress an instinct, a desire that must have been put by God into us in the first place. Otherwise, how would we know? The essential division of opinion is this: did God make men, or did men make many gods? There are enough discrepancies just in the well-known version for us to be certain that we're looking here at a God who improvises, who's jealous, who's short of temper, who's inconsistent, or, if by any chance God didn't make Moses and the Hebrews, that the people who made God were jealous, short-tempered, inconsistent, and capricious in their turn. I don't know about you, but as between the consideration that man was made by God, or that many gods were made by men, I've never thought there was much doubt as to which was the correct version. How might Decalogue...
And then it goes on to give his own account of the Ten Commandments, which I have a great deal of... it's not easy to do, but Christopher Hitchens certainly doesn't nail it. If you want to watch it, it's a Vanity Fair interview on YouTube. Well, I'll leave it there. But I think he, especially in his critique, in his cynical... Yeah, I suppose you could say Hitchens is a cynic. In his cynical view of religion as a whole, I think he gives a good insight into the kind of his concerns in relation to the nature of these commandments, and especially at the end there, where he starts like highlighting the very human, crass emotions, which may be something that people in command or in control of a society, of a group of people, to keep themselves up on the top side of it. Maybe those emotions come to bear more than others. So hey, let's have a new tablet, let's set these new rules in stone, so that we can keep our status quo going. And you can see how they react in the terms that Hitchens used there in relation to worrisome people trying to keep themselves in a certain position. But I was just looking at this, and just look at whatever. Just remember, anyone that you consider your religious leader, whether it's a priest, a rabbi, imam, or I don't know, whatever there might be out there in the world. I just like to look. No one's more or less holy than you, and it almost comes back to the doctrine of everyone's equal under the law. Doesn't matter who you are. You're either a man or a woman, but there's no man in law terms. There's no relevant right that a man can kill a woman or a woman can kill a man. That obviously each case is taken on its own merit, but and its own necessities. But what I see more and more, and especially with things like Nick Ferrari asking for higher punishments against crimes done against police force, ambulance workers, and fire brigade. Yeah, okay, these are crimes against a person, not crimes against a man. Obviously, these persons put themselves out of the way for their public service, which is on the face of it, an honourable thing to do, but they're no more or less a victim of violence, whether you're someone walking home from the pub and beaten up randomly, or an ambulance crew that goes out to a drunken pub trying to help people, and then they get attacked themselves. It's the wrongdoer is still the wrongdoer, and the victim is still the victim. The idea that a person, there's like weird factors, like they call them aggravating factors. That because he was black, because it was a woman, because it was late at night, because of this, that. Well, late at night's different, but or because he was an ambulance person, or because he was a policeman, they have prejudice against policemen, or because he's a homeless guy and he's a nobody. That means that he doesn't get care, or he gets more care than just being a man that's been wronged. Is very much the Roman persona side of it, where you're mixing personas have value. Personas don't have value in law. The king and the peasant are equal. So it doesn't matter if you're a policeman or an ambulance driver or a fireman or a king of England. If you've done wrong against your fellow man, all that hocus pocus, persona, life's a stage nonsense, that all goes out the window, and we look at the two naked dummies, if you like. Well, let's not even say dummies as a person. Let's look at the two naked people in front of us, weigh them up on the scales of justice, balance of evidences that can come and tip the scales one way or the other, and punishment and justice will be given out as appropriate. Well, let's leave it there. But I thought Hitchens is a very educated man. He knows what he's doing. His opinion is definitely worth looking at. he's done many speeches, and thankfully there's lots of them on YouTube, and they're all worth looking at in some respect, because he always gives a very intellectual insight. He is a bit self-indulgent, I suppose you could say, self-elitist, but I mean, when you're of such a caliber of brain power, I suppose that comes with it. Anyway, have a great day.